25th day of January. It's 2024. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. You can call into the live show at 709-589-4406. We got a big show again tonight. Nuclear industry never takes a break. That's the way it is. Always takes me a moment or a half to get up to cruising speed. You've heard me mention Robert Hayes. He's a professor. His students shouldn't be allowed to get jobs. Let's put it that way. He's that evil. He's actually evil. We'll get to him. He's really something. Lying is just so natural. And he hides, like, he's not an actual professor. He gets that, he is a professor, but he gets that title because he's such an evil person. He doesn't have a single redeeming quality in his body. So Fukushima had 4 reactors. Chernobyl was one. Chernobyl was a small reactor. It was mostly graphite, which is different than plutonium and uranium. It did have plutonium and uranium, but it was mostly graphite. These reactors in Japan also had 2 fuel pools at the very top of the buildings, and they were full of decades of reactor cores. So you had reactor 1, the 100% meltdown. Reactor 1 was 100% meltdown, and the 2 fuel pools were 100% meltdown. Reactor 2 was 100% meltdown, a total loss, and the 2 fuel pools, which each had around 10 reactor cores total, are lost. There's the detonation of reactor 1. I'm sorry, that's the detonation of reactor 3. And reactor 3 is to your right. That's, again, 100% meltdown. This was a mixed oxide fuel. And 2 fuel pools are 100% meltdown. We've never seen a single fuel pool meltdown before, let alone 8 of them. That's what was left after the 3rd year. In other words, they only kept the stumps there so they can put these contraptions over it and then pretend that they were actually in the fuel pool. They actually covered it up. The media is assassinating you every step of the way now for 80 years. And every academic on the planet that's seen this picture knew they were not in the fuel pools. Every academic in the nuclear industry, every Yale, Stanford, Oxford, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, nuclear academic, nuclear professors, nuclear scientists, nuclear deans, every nuclear corporation on the planet knew they weren't in no fuel pool, that they were faking it. What do you think that they done something like that? And think about the cooperation where the world's media had to buy into that fake story for it to work. So we got a poll. Was it evil for Japan and the International Atomic Energy Agency, because they can't hide it without their cooperation, or their planning, more like it, to hide 8 nuclear fuel pool meltdowns? There was also 4 meltdown of reactors at the Fukushima plant. Was that evil? And it's not up for debate, is it? You should watch my videos before 12 hours of posting. That's like after the show is over, you got 12 hours, and then after 12 hours, the video is going to get a little shorter or a little longer. Nobody knows what they're up to. They've been doing it. They don't do it on any other videos. The show was over last night. We had 18 views, and we had 46 likes. And then we had a poll last night. Should nuclear power scientists be on trial for crimes against humanity after destroying the biosphere. And yes, unequivocally, they should be getting the death penalty, and it should be public executions of all academics in the nuclear industry. They have betrayed the species and humanity and have set us on a terrible path of self-destruction due to perpetual radioactive emissions for 80 years. The show last night was 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 15 seconds, and was 4 seconds shorter. So this is a new thing. Normally it gets longer by 6 seconds. But they switched up about a week ago, after 2 years, over 2 years, and now my videos are getting a little shorter. So at 12 hours in, the video would get an extra 6 seconds, typically longer. So it looks like they're taking out 10 seconds or something, putting in the 6 seconds, and we're seeing whatever remains. Because that's been the trend now for several years. We don't see it on any other videos on YouTube, period. The nuclear industry is completely, unbelievably sadistic. Right, to pretend they're in buildings that don't exist, it's just unconscionable. We got quite a few headlines to cover on the Noto earthquake. We're going to cover that right away. Starting now, let's do a little tiny recap. Hope everybody's doing well in this bizarre world we live in, where only nuclear matters and everything else is scum, particularly me. Japan quake toll rises to 15. What was the date on this? This was January the 3rd, 2 days after the original earthquake. On January the 3rd, because the earthquake happened on the 1st, New Year's Day, in Suzu, a town of about 5,000 households, 5,000, 90% of the houses may have been destroyed, according to the mayor. So if the mayor doesn't know, who would know? And this was the last day they reported on it, was the 3rd. So on the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd, this is what they reported, and they didn't report on it for the last 22 days. Can you explain that to me? And that's in the community of Suzu, where you see the bullseye on the top and the other bullseye over there. So that model over there shows you the fault line cutting through right down the center of 2 nuclear power plants, which are about 50 kilometers on either side of a fault line that's been silent for 3,000 to 4,000 years, is now ruptured. It's quite the extraordinary story just on its own, right? Ishikawa Prefecture says 1,370 homes were destroyed. It was around day 8 or day 9. The peninsula for 85 kilometers, right through Suzu, Fukushima, and Shika. And remember, Shika is where the nuclear power plant, we believe the fuel pool is melted down. And so they got 200, it was roughly 250 meters, which is 820 feet of new coastline, and it rose up about 13 feet out of the ocean, and that's why they have 820 feet of coastline. It's been a very strange story, this earthquake. We've never seen nothing like it. One of the polls we had, and I believe this was on day 10 or 11, or day 8, should Japan rescue the tens of thousands of quake victims abandoned with no food, water, or heat for 8 days? There's still thousands abandoned, and they stopped reporting on communities that haven't been reached, were isolated, about 6 days ago. Just randomly stopped. We never heard the names of those communities again. Does it seem that Japan purposely was leaving roadblocks to Shika nuclear power plant to hide the meltdown of the fuel pool? So this question was trying to highlight, this was around day 10, or day 9 actually, and so we were trying to understand why they didn't clean up the landslides, because they have so many earthquakes. They always clean up the landslides. You'll always see all kinds of heavy equipment. And so each community will do that on each side of the community. and then outside, and the federal government will dig in from the outside, right? And then after a couple of days, they will usually open up some kind of path. They didn't open up any paths until, even today, it's very difficult to traverse. Well, we haven't seen anybody go to Shika. And Shika, they said, was 7 out of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. The earthquake shook the nuclear plant past the safety limit January 11th. The plant, the nuclear power plant, which was off, but the fuel pools are still full of reactor cores, located in Shika, Ishikawa Prefecture, took the brunt of the devastating 7.6 magnitude earthquake that claimed. So the nuclear plant took the brunt. That's quite the statement on its own. 14 days later, the town of Shika observed a maximum seismic intensity scale of 0 to 7. So they say 7 out of 7 without saying 7 out of 7. And I mean, what was the big deal? Why wouldn't you use the 7 out of the 7? So they say the maximum seismic intensity on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 0 to 7, which meant they took a 7. Not trying to confuse you, I'm sure. They are. The cities Nanano, Ojima, Suzu, as well as the town of Anamazu, which is on the inside of the peninsula, recorded upper 6 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. Upper 6 is equal to about an 8 point or a 9.2 or more on the Richter scale. Now they do it to hide the earthquake, right? That's what they use that Shindu, and Taiwan does the same thing. And if you've seen the earthquakes Taiwan has, you would understand why they're doing that particular nasty trick. And so this is a very, very rare picture of Shika, but it does show a house collapse on a car. It's such a rare picture, and the big question is why. Japan's earthquake has rendered at least 15 ports unusable. 15 ports rose up so much they don't exist anymore because of the extension of the coastline rising up 13 feet in the air. Because of a fault line that's been silent for 3,000 to 4,000 years has been activated. And there's various types of damage has been reported in 58 ports. And more than 20,000 homes have been completely destroyed. This was January the 17th. This is 17 days later. But what we were hearing was only 14 homes were destroyed, despite the fact for the first 3 days, they said 4,500 homes in Suzu were completely destroyed. Then they, after 3 days, refused to talk about that again. Around the same time, they acknowledged that they got 24,000 homes quite far away from the epicenter and in other prefectures to accommodate the victims who've lost their homes, which suggests over 24,000 homes were destroyed. Registered the highest level is 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale is 7 in the town where the nuclear power plants are to. Have you ever heard of a 10 of a 10 earthquake right alongside of a nuclear power plant with no damage? And the Shika nuclear power plant is up here on the peninsula, Ishikawa Peninsula. They got major damage all the way down to Fukai and all the way over to Nagata, where there's 6,700 homes were severely damaged by the earthquake and liquefaction. And that there was 1,400 homes over right here, 4,500 homes at the very top, endless amount of homes right across from it. We got a picture of a single house collapsed in it. They admit that the earthquake was 7 out of 7 in the Shika community, and that in the basement of the plant, they said it was an upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale of the reactor 1. According to the company that owns the plant, the earthquake registered an upper 5 and a maximum of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale beneath the number 1 reactor, which is such a strange statement, right? Not beneath the reactors, not beneath reactor 2, not beneath the pump house, Not beneath the administration building, not beneath the incinerators that these disease factories all have. But in the basement, so what it said line was the upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale beneath the number 1 plant. Like, how can you have it beneath the number 1 but not beneath the number 2? The Japan Times, which is the mouthpiece for the Japanese government, said the earthquake was an upper 5 on Japanese seismic intensity scale, which is 7, which meant it was a 6 out of a 7, which meant it was about an 8.4 or higher on the Richter scale in the basement of the number 1 reactor building. In the basement of a reactor building, an earthquake, a massive 8.4 on the Richter scale, / upper 6 on the 7 scale in the Japan seismic intensity scale known as the Shindo. So a 7 out of a 7 is the worst shaking you could have. It's like a 10 out of a 10 on the Richter scale. So it gets very confusing, right? And that's not an accident. How can you have it in the basement of a reactor building, but not in the basement of the other reactor building less than 100 feet away? Why was the focus on the number 1 reactor building so much? And these stories are 5 or 6 days apart. So we assume, because of all the damage for the whole peninsula and far past it, and three prefectures with severe damage, and that the fault line was a 4,000-year-old, 3 to 4,000-year-old fault line that hasn't erupted, as far as they know, for 3 to 4,000 years, is now ruptured. I mean, and apparently it didn't move very much, so they're expecting another major earthquake. So we got more news on that right after this short story. This one here was he 10,000. Now we covered this last month or the month before. Who knows? I lose track. We've never seen a jet stream perfectly straight. And now we're seeing it again. That's twice in just a month or in a month and a half or something. And we believe this is the Fukushima effect. It's pretty weird. It's coming into the West Coast. It's going to bring above average conditions. And then it changes. It's got a big loop into it. But we've never ever seen a jet stream that was perfectly flat. And I just happened to take that last night when the show was over. Drones and little snake robots are going to go into a nuclear meltdown. I got no idea why they're talking about that stuff. Okay, back to the earthquake. And geophysicist William Frank discusses how a recent earthquake in Japan related to an earthquake swarm in the region. So for the last 3 years, they've been getting an average of 8,000 earthquakes a year, small earthquakes. And they had a few big ones, but not like this. Now, normally in a year, they get around 20 small earthquakes. So they went from 20 small earthquakes to 8,000 a year for 3 years, I think it is. And now we had a major event on New Year's Day. And that square out there seems to be where a lot of the big ones are concentrated. Right? And then look where the Eurasian plate and the North American plate are hanging out. Let me post that down here so I can get access to it. So it's right on, that square, a rectangle I should say, is right on the fault line. And it's prone to earthquake. Everybody's aware of that, I would imagine, worldwide. Including a magnitude 9.1 earthquake in 2011 triggered a tsunami, killed almost 20,000 people. It would kill a lot more because of the nuclear meltdowns. There was 865,000 cancers in the first year. 6 out of 10 children got diabetes. 14,200 children, neonates and infants, need open heart surgery per 100,000 newborns for congenital malformations. There's 13,646 children with thyroid tumors over 2 centimeters out of 38,000, when it used to be 1 in a million pre-Fukushima, which scale up to 358,000 out of a million, and that the 2 centimeter thyroid tumor, which they call small, is actually large because the thyroid is only 3 by 5 centimeters. Japan is prone to earthquakes because it's at the western edge of the Pacific plate, and the list goes on, by the way. It doesn't just stop right there. Death rates will give you the creeps of people dying of heart attacks. Japan is prone to earthquakes because it's at the western edge of the Pacific plate in a more complicated junction where two plates are subducting, one plunging beneath the tectonic plate that Japan is sitting on. So they say, so they think. Nobody really knows 100% for sure. It's the best guesstimate. At the interface between those plates, where you're going to have a lot of earthquakes, because you're going to generate stress and the plates move past one another. The earthquake, interestingly, this earthquake on January the 1st was not due to subduction. It's on the west coast of the island. The subduction zones are on the east coast. That's the 2011? Or no, that's this one, 2024. There are still a lot of active tectonics that are not related to the subduction. Well, there's 4 plates there, isn't it? This earthquake swarm happening there since 2020. The latest earthquake is the largest big earthquake in the swarm. The map shows the radius of the intensity surrounding the epicenter of the earthquake in colored lines. Now, you've had over 1,400 aftershocks since January the 1st. That on its own is unbelievable. It means that 3,000 to 4,000 year old fault line that is ruptured is unbelievably active and is obviously going to have another event. Normally you have big earthquakes, what we call a main shock, that is followed by a sequence of aftershocks. But in a swarm, there's no clear main shock because there's a lot of earthquakes before and there's a lot of earthquakes after. The 2011 earthquake, that's what I got a cup of tea for, Dana. The 2011 earthquake was the subduction of the plate, Pacific plate beneath Japan. Try water in a second. I know it's peroxide. That'll fix you. That's why I got it there, I guess. And with the peroxide, you want to spray it really on your jugular vein, but I find it doesn't hurt to spray it on your throat too. So you have a lot of fault real estate that can rupture together and generate a magnitude 9 earthquake. On the East Coast, which is facing North America. That earthquake was offshore Japan, so the shaking was strong, but the biggest damage came from the tsunami. The sudden motion of the seafloor moved the water on top. The seafloor dropped for 180 miles or something. And so that displaced all the water. The water rolled on itself, and when it comes in at around 400 miles per hour. It created a tsunami that caused its own set of after effects and damage to the coast of Japan. I'm talking about the 2011, obviously. After the New Year's Day earthquake, the Japanese authority initially put out a bunch of tsunami alerts, but then eventually removed them when they realized, that we don't expect this to generate the motion necessary for a tsunami. But they did have tsunami. And a tsunami would have done more damage if 85 kilometers of the coastline didn't rise up 13 feet. And extend out for 800 feet. And Suzu was hit with a serious tsunami. We showed you some pictures of the boats earlier. That's the only reason he got up there is because of a tsunami. So I'm not sure what they're talking about when they say they eventually removed the tsunami warnings when they realized we don't expect this to generate the motion necessary for a tsunami, but it did generate it. Like the subduction zones off the coast of the East Coast. For this one, we don't have a good idea beforehand or what the actual structures that are going to host the earthquakes, because we don't have a good idea where the earthquakes can potentially happen. And we can't use the simple model of a slip budget along a fault. No, because it's been silent for almost 4,000 years. This is a total guessing game because we don't have any kind of references withstanding the last 3 years of 8,000 small aftershocks a year, which is, like, if you're living in a place with an average of 20 earthquakes a year, small ones, and then one year you're getting 8,000, and you don't move out of there, okay, all right, whatever. Okay, so next year you get another 8,000, you still don't move out of there. The government still don't suggest it, Something is happening. We know there's a fault line, it's right there. If it happens, it's lickety split, it's on top of you. All right, okay, so people are still just complacent. But the third year, and you have 8,000 aftershocks, and you still don't move out of there. I'm not going to say what I think of these people, because I'm sure they're wonderful people, but I'm just saying, if that was me, that's a big nudge, nudge, wink, wink right there, right? If you have 20 small earthquakes a year, and then you're getting... let me do the divide, because I'm stupid tonight. I can't do it on my own for some reason. Okay, here we go. 8,000. I'll bring it up for everybody so we can all have a laugh at one time. I'm going to bring it up, Dana. So take 8,000 earthquakes a year and divide it by 365 days. That's the average of how many earthquakes a day? Right, I'm not going to click the button yet. I want you to think for 1 second. So we know it's at least, so let's say 11 earthquakes a day. 21 earthquakes a day. 22 earthquakes a day, right? 21.9, that's basically 22 earthquakes a day. So if you went from 20 a year to 22 earthquakes a day, hello? Am I right or am I right? So, like wouldn't your brain go, I don't know, mommy, daddy, we should move out of here, or husband or wife, we should move out of here? Was it evil for Japan, International Atomic Energy Agency, to hide the 8 nuclear fuel pool meltdowns at the Fukushima number 4 reactor? Yeah. Yeah. I say yeah. Anyone give me a yeah? Ooh, yeah. Government estimates central Japan quake damage will reach 2.6 trillion. Oh, so 2.6 trillion. That's 17 billion US dollars. That's quite a climb from the 6 billion that all the insurance companies originally came out with 3 billion estimate. Then they said 6 billion, and then they just kept their pie holes shut. Now the federal government is saying they're going to spend 17.6 billion. Damage to the houses, the roads, the ports, and other infrastructure. And they give you a breakdown of prefectures, by the way, in a second. 1.1 trillion and 2.6 trillion yen in the 3 disaster-hit prefectures: Ishikawa, Toyama, and Niigata. It's quite the picture, isn't it? Some heartbreaking pictures coming up. And I say that because they could have been in there in the first 5 days when there was no snow and no rain. They wouldn't let the Americans go in with the dogs and the specialized team. They wouldn't let China go in with the dogs and the specialized team to rescue people in the critical 72-hour. They wouldn't let India go in with the special search and rescue teams with their own dogs, their own equipment, completely independent, and get people out from under the buildings before the critical 72 hours was up. They wouldn't let anybody go in. They wouldn't even let the self-defense force fly a helicopter in there. They wouldn't let anybody else fly a helicopter in there. And we still haven't seen actual footage of any community. Not a single community. Not one. They've been recycling the same pictures as Fukushima, which has much more extensive damage than they're showing. All they show you is the footage of the 200 buildings and houses that burnt down. They estimated 400 billion and 900 billion yen for residential properties, which is 8 billion Canadian, 8.25 billion Canadian. 400 billion to 900 billion yen for residential properties, 200 billion to 400 billion for non-residential buildings like factories and offices, 500 billion to 1.3 trillion for public infrastructures like roads, water, pipes, and port facilities, which basically is $20 billion you're actually talking about now. $20.3 billion US dollars of damage. So obviously this is not a few thousand homes we're talking about. But prefecture Ishikawa sustained the most damage at 900 billion, 1.3 trillion yen, followed by Tokuyama at 100 billion to 500 billion. Why such a big discrepancy there, I wonder? And they got that at the same time, but their discrepancy is even bigger at 100 billion to 600 billion yen. And yesterday we covered a story that they had 6,700 homes destroyed by liquefaction, where the foundation mixed with so much water became liquefied. And the buildings now are unstable, and so they crumble because they weigh so much, right? And the earthquakes. And damage costs were calculated based on the maximum 7 on the country's seismic intensity scale. So if that's the case, then Shika was 7 out of 7, right? And that the nuclear plant itself was an upper 5, which is a 6, because the scale works on the 7. It doesn't do like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. Like the Richter scale, it goes 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, all the way to 7. So an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7 is a 6. And so the way to do that, to convert it to the Richter scale, because you divide the Richter scale, or the Shindu scale, into the Richter scale. So divide 10 by 7, and 1.428. And 5, 1.429, which is 1.43. So you multiply that by the upper 5, which is a 6 on Japan scale, and then that is an 8.57, which is 8.6 on the Richter scale. And you love doing this because it's very confusing for the average person. And me too, right? And you too, and everybody else. Yeah, I know. Don't forget to give us a couple of little clicks around there, subscribing, like, and all that pretty looking stuff. Let me try it again here. I'll get it right. See, the best thing with me is I get multiple tries, so I'll always get it right. I have that favorite. Yeah. Let's keep it rolling. So damage costs were therefore calculated based, and I showed you at the beginning that the Shika community was a 7 out of a 7, and that the nuclear plant took the brunt of the damage of the earthquake, which was a 150 kilometer fault line that has been silent for 3,000 to 4,000 years. And so if you're not confused, you're a liar. You liar. Stop lying. You're confused. And somebody commented yesterday that they walk down the road in the sunshine with a banana and they don't understand what the big whoop is about. And I agree. Every once in a while we get a comment like that. It cracks me up. Thanks, Polly. The same adjustments were made to the municipalities of Noto and Mizu for the calculation. So they're up right there above the L in nuclear, just for reference sake. The office said the figure is calculated automatically based on the strength of the earthquake rather than the actual reported damages. So it doesn't need anything to quantify their assertions. Just the Shindu scale itself. So if the Shindu scale is high, then yeah, there's going to be brutal damage because they know it is. Because like once you get up to 6, you're up to around 8.5 to 9 and bigger on the Richter scale. See, so they know it's going to be damaged. There's no way it's not. So that's why they do it that way. So when you hear an upper 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7, in the community where the nuclear power plant is, Shika, and you don't get any pictures of it there whatsoever. For some reason, the same as Suzu. Did Suzu hold nuclear waste, I wonder? Is that why? Because there was a big port there, right? They might have been shipping it out of there. It compares with 16.9 trillion yen in the aftermath of a massive quake and tsunami on March 11th. So you're talking about 3 trillion for the Noto Peninsula, the Ishikawa Peninsula rather, prefecture, and the Nagata and the Fuji prefectures. And the 11 tsunami, which was 1,200 miles of the coastline, up to 10 kilometers inland, was ripped off the coast, disappeared. So there's a lot of damage on the Ishikawa Noto Peninsula, obviously, when you do this comparison, right? The government also finalized a policy package. This was to support the Noto Peninsula quake victims, including a relief payment of 100,000 yen to households that meet certain criteria, such as damage costs totaling at least 50% of their property and possessions, and an income of 5 million yen or less. So 100,000 yen is equal to $900. Again, this is not going to, $900 is not going to help them, only for a couple of days in the desperation of these people. There was a lot of people, and when I say a lot, I'm talking 30,000 people, for around 10 days were surviving on one slice of bread, not butter, not jam, but one slice of bread and a cup of water, not a glass of water, for at least the first 10, 12 days, right? We've covered this, believe it or not, for 25 days. We haven't stopped trying to find out what's going on in Shika. And now that we know that the compensation is based on the intensity instead of the actual reported damage, we can extrapolate an absurd amount of accurate information because that's how they're doing it. Right? So that quantifies us extrapolating that the fuel pool melted down. Why would they invoke reactor 1 at the Shika nuclear power plant had a large earthquake in the basement by the mouthpiece to Japan Times itself? And until we can quantify that it's not melted down, I am not going to stop gouging the internet trying to figure out what is happening. The plume at this stage has now almost circled the entire planet with a continuous plume. Let me show you what it looks like if it melted down. And the model to your left, for instance, of the radioactive fallout, April the 7th, is based on 25 days of radioactive fallout. From Fukushima, the plume covers the entire planet. We have many, many models from many major institutions worldwide of Fukushima. They hid the meltdowns at the fuel pools, and that's why we have a poll asking, was that exceptionally evil to hide the fuel pools? And we have 100% yes. Hang on. Why am I struggling to find a map when I have endless amounts of them? It's okay. I'm struggling with everything now. Hang on. Wait a second. I'll get it, I swear. Please. Wait a minute. All right, here I got one. Respect restored. Okay, so pretend this is Shika because it's basically the same spot as Japan, right? That's the plume from Fukushima. And right now you're at, I'll tell you in a second, 16 days after the tsunami. That's 9 days after the last reactor melted down and blew up of radioactive fallout. And the model is from Japan or France's government, and it's showing us 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137, a gamma emitter, per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet. And all the models have the same attributes. So 3 million yen for completely destroyed properties will also be dispersed to households. A rebuilding support fund. Are you going to rebuild on a spot where there's 8,000 earthquakes a year all of a sudden after 4,000 years, and where the whole country was just ripped apart and lifted up 13 feet, and where they expect to have many more like it? It seems futile, don't it? To help boost the recovery in tourism, so we go back to the 3,000 Japanese yen. Per household that was destroyed is $27,000, but the average price of the houses, according to the loans that they were offering people on 1.7% interest after like 6 or 7 days, was for $325,000 Canadian. So they're going to give them $27,000. Now, I don't know if they're lending it to him or giving it to him. Let me read that again. A rebuilding support fund providing up to 3 million yen for completely destroyed properties will also be dispersed to households. Again, you got to be very careful because that might be, you have to pay that one back. But no one's going to build back there unless you give it to them. So it sounds like they might give it to them. To help boost recovery in tourism, the government will offer a subsidy covering half of the travel expenses to the 4 prefectures. Half the travel expenses, and they're going to cap it at $20,000 per night, which is $180 Canadian a night. In 4 prefectures. 4. So the Niigata, which is where there's a nuclear power plant, the Toyama, the Ishikawa, and the Fukai. So the Ishikawa, the Fukai is south, the Niigata is north of the peninsula. Small and medium-sized business will get 75% of the repair cost for facilities, production, machinery, for a maximum of 1.5 billion yen in Ishikawa, 300 million yen in Niigata. For small and medium-sized business will 75% of the repair cost for the facilities and production machinery. But again, you're having 8,000 earthquakes a year. If I live in a place that gets 20 earthquakes a year for 3,000 years, and then I'm getting 8,000 a year, it's time to move. And if you don't move, there's something wrong with your friggin' head. You're getting 21 earthquakes a day, average. When you used to get 20 a year. The hell is that noise? You got a train tracks here or something? No, it's just another earthquake. We just had one 20 minutes ago. So you're basically getting an earthquake every hour of every day for an entire year. I don't know if I'm dizzy or that was an earthquake. Do you get where I'm going? You're trying to sleep in bed. What time? Well, it's almost time for another earthquake. I'll turn off the lights when I get another earthquake, Mommy. I can hear kids. Okay. Japan warns of economic impact of the Noto earthquake. And why are they recycling this picture? This is the Fukushima picture. Why don't you show us something else? It's not like they don't have enough damage there to show us something else. While Ishikawa, the prefecture where the Noto is located, accounts for only 0.8% of Japan's gross domestic product, some of the local plants, like the makers of production machineries and power semiconductors, have been unable to resume production. The whole prefecture lost power, water, sewer, and they don't expect to get any of that back in the majority of it until at least April. So February, for at least 3 months. Which tells you they got to relay everything, don't it? And how's that going to play out, though? Because there's another earthquake right around the corner. And you know there is. They're still having 8,000 aftershocks a year, around 21 a day. Japan's Prime Minister Kishida pledges all his support, but he abandoned them for at least 2 weeks straight. Well, it was more than that, 3 weeks. We covered it nonstop. Did we see any heavy machinery in that time? Did we see any bulldozers, any backhoes, any excavators? Did we see search and rescue teams? Did we see a single search and rescue dog? Did we see the military-industrial complex show up by the herds, by the 10,000 or 15,000, like they do for other earthquakes of the same magnitude every other time in their history, but didn't show up this time? They wouldn't let international teams go in with search and rescue. We've never seen that before. He praises all their support, but where's the support? And now that you're making these promises, how long before the promises comes to fruition? It's a failed society, isn't it? Japan's government draws up support plan to help the quake-hit region. He didn't drop nothing. Somebody drew it up to him, and he sat in front of a camera. Somebody else called a press conference. He showed up with his entourage. They gave him a piece of paper and with capital letters, and he sat there and read it off. And the media come out and yippee-ki-yay. Under the plan, the residents are exempt from the cost of demolishing their own homes and will swiftly receive up to $20,000, which is American money, because they always do it that way, right? To reconstruct houses that were destroyed or more than half destroyed, which we know is over 20,000. And here's another bumbling buffoon. So they hired these, the news reporters, like I wouldn't let them back a tractor into a farmer's field, let alone tie my shoes. That's how much confidence I have in this guy. He's the guy who counts the chocolate chips and the cookies when he buys them at the supermarket before he pays for it. Come on, Dan, that's a little extreme. No, I'm serious. I'm 3,000% serious. We don't know where this is to. They like showing you houses but not telling you where it's to. That's another of their favorite tricks. These houses are crumbling. And why are they recycling these pictures? Why do we get these every day? This is Fukushima. Same section over and over. But we know there's brutal damage in Fukushima. Huh? Brutal damage. So how come they don't show it to us? They bring out, and why are these pictures always the worst quality that human can provide? It's like a 25-year-old cell phone they took it with, like a 1 megapixel camera or something. Why are they doing that? I need to know because it's driving me nuts. This is Suzu, where they estimated 4,500 of the 5,000 homes, not counting the businesses and offices and school. Well, there's over 900 schools were significantly damaged. So for every 20 houses, a school was severely damaged. It's quite the ratio, isn't it? So what's missing from the picture, see? This is where the tsunami came ashore, but there's 4,500 homes were destroyed in the community. We've never seen the pictures of it. They keep showing us these pictures, though, of the boats over and over and over. And we know that some of the pottery places been around for hundreds of years making traditional techniques. It's just, that pottery is just unbelievable. By the way, a lot of that was destroyed. It's horrifying. The equipment and the techniques and the stuff that they're dependent upon. I hate it when that kind of lineage gets destroyed because it's just beautiful stuff. These pictures, I'm not sure because Kishida's new aid package aims to help the recovery of the quake-hit areas. So this is Suzu. Look at this. They made a lawyer out of me. About time. I'm not complaining. I'm glad they made a lawyer out of me. I gotta go goggle. Hang on. Turn the volume back up. Testing. 1, 2. I know one day we forgot to turn the volume back up and yakking away. All happy and cheery. Everybody's like, Dana, you got your volume down. So this is Suzu. My God. I seen this today and I seen it was Suzu. I was scared because I figured I'm going to get struck by lightning or something. I've been waiting 25 days for some pictures. Is that very long? It's not very long, is it? 25 days? But it's just one picture, Dana. Collapsed as a result of the earthquake. Many buildings in the city of Suzu. But as I showed you at the beginning, that the mayor quoted endless amount of times in 3 days, the first 3 days, as literally there wasn't a building left standing in Suzu, but at least 90% of them, which is 4,500 of the 5,000 buildings, if my math is any good anymore, were completely destroyed. This is the mayor. If the mayor doesn't know, who knows? Then you can't trust the mayor. It's true, but just this one time I got to kind of like, look at it though. Shake, rattle, and roll. And this is right by the epicenter. Despite the fact that the Shika, just 35, 40 kilometers away to the south, was 7 out of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7, which is a 10 out of 10 on the Richter scale, according to the insurance companies. Intended to support recovery efforts and aid the local economy as Ishikawa and surrounding prefectures were devastated. I think that qualifies as devastated. The funding comes more than 3 weeks after the quake struck, and there's more than 46,000 households still without water or sewage, and 15,000 people are still in evacuation centers. And you know how much they love to brag, right? If they had all kinds of supplies coming in, how come we don't see the mainstream media flying over this or bringing in supplies trying to get a jump on the government? Or why don't we see private entities going in there like we normally see, right? How come Red Cross waited 20 days? Red Cross. There was a company had 100,000 parkers, winter parkers, that they wanted to send up to any community that needed. All I had to do was reach out to them. 20,000 or 100,000 winter jackets because people had no blankets. They were living on a slice of bread and a cup of water for at least the first 2 weeks. They could have brought in helicopters and just dropped off supplies on a big piece of rope, right? Just left it right there, and everybody could come out and got generators and gas and food and water and pills to sterilize your water and the toilet paper in those places. People didn't get a shower. They didn't even clean the roads in the communities. At least, the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th of January, they still hadn't cleaned the roads up in the communities. And every community got heavy equipment. Nothing makes any sense. Unless you put in a nuclear meltdown at the fuel pool at the Shika nuclear power plant. Everything makes sense all of a sudden now. Many people in the affected area are still forced to live under severe conditions in evacuation centers. Even today, there's 15,000 of them because that's today's paper. Addressing concerns about the lack of water in many parts of the quake-hit region, he promised more help was coming. That's what he said from the beginning. Give us a couple of weeks. We're going to send up some supplies. Try not to eat each other while you're waiting. Heavy snow slams the Quake-hit area of Ishikawa Prefecture. Don't ask me what that is. Heavy snow hit the Quake-hit area. Japan's Chamber of Commerce, I think it's around 80 centimeters. Now they're expecting another 60 centimeters. So any buildings that are fragile is going to get all this weight on them. Guess what's going to happen each day with 20 earthquakes? Shaking the remains. And the aftershocks they're having originally is one every 7 minutes in the Noto Peninsula. Japanese Chamber of Commerce Foundation established a relief fund for the Noto Peninsula earthquake victims. You know they're going to steal the majority of it, right? 4.3 miles northwest of Suzu is the epicenter. And so Suzu, we know, had 4,500 homes destroyed, but after the third day, they refused to talk about it ever again. And tonight we finally got a picture of something besides the tsunami damage, which was epic, wasn't it? The earthquake caused many deaths, injuries, collapse of houses and buildings, fires, and landslides. It's around 1,400 landslides, for goodness sakes. The military had to go in and dig out traffic. And I'm not sure where the hell this was to, but it's close to the Noto Peninsula. But it's probably in Ishikawa Prefecture, I believe. Japanese Fukushima nuclear plant, but it gives you context about what the victims that have been abandoned for 25 days are going through. Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant further delays removal of melted fuel debris. We got more earthquake coming up, but we're just going to cover Fukushima. So that was the, what do we got done here? It's almost an hour to tell just the earthquake side of the version. We got some more stuff coming up about the earthquake. A little bit coming up about Fukushima, because there's big news on Fukushima. Let me get set up to tell that story. Madness. It's just madness, eh? We'll figure it out. Let's wing it. Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant further delayed removal of melted fuel debris. So now they're talking about number 2 reactor. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disease factory. The operated tsunami hit. I hate it when they do that, by the way. Nuclear meltdown hit Fukushima Daiichi Thursday, a delay of several more months before launching a test to remove melted fuel debris. They're not removing debris, they're removing a granular, like the size less than the flakes of sugar or salt you would put on fries, for instance, from inside one of the reactors. Well, none of the reactors are intact, they're all gone, citing problems clearing the way for the robotic arm. So that's reactor 2 we're talking about in that case, because we're talking about both of them. The drones, the size of a slice of bread, which is literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard, by the way. The debris cleanup initially was supposed to be started by 2021, according to TEPCO, which is not a decommissioning authority, has been plagued with delays, underscoring the difficulty of recovering from the plant's meltdown. You can't recover from the plant's meltdown. You buried the entire planet in radioactive fallout. Japan is brutal amount of radioactive fallout and still coming out of there. The disaster destroyed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant's power supply. No, it took out all the telephone poles for 1,200 miles. All nuclear power plants are dependent upon external power. All nuclear power plants need 2 dedicated oil, gas, or coal plants dedicated to the nuclear plant 24 hours a day, causing 3 reactors to melt down. It was 4 reactors melt down and 8 fuel pools melted down. And massive amount of fatally radioactive melted nuclear fuel remains inside. Fatally radioactive. fatally radioactive melted nuclear fuel. To everything except for drones the size of a slice of bread, which we know is simply not true. The government and Tokyo Electric Power Company, which are both degenerates, and at least they spelled TEPCO properly with uppercase letters for a change, initially committed to start removing the melted fuel from inside one of the 3 damaged reactors within 10 years of the nuclear. Like, they haven't removed the fuel out of Chernobyl because it's a meltdown. They haven't removed the fuel out of Santa Susana because it's a meltdown. TEPCO is not a decommissioning authority. Shouldn't have been left in charge. They're just an operator. They didn't build it. They don't know nothing about it. They were put in charge because that way you don't blame the nuclear industry, see? You blame TEPCO. And if TEPCO gets enough blame, then TEPCO just declares bankruptcy. Disappears. The nuclear industry is left conscious-free. After a remote-controlled robot successfully clipped and lifted a granular of melted fuel during an internal probe. A granular. It couldn't clip a granular because in order to get close enough to a fuel rod, for instance, or a meltdown, it's just going to cook electronics immediately. It can't survive. That's a total fabrication, right? They had granulars dispersed over the entire planet. TEPCO officials said the inside of the planned entryway for the robotic arm is filled with deposits believed to be melted equipment, cables, and other debris from the meltdowns. And their harder than expected removal has delayed their plans. They're perpetual lawyers is what they really are. And don't believe this picture. Fukushima melted nuclear fuel retrieval delayed past March. I love pictures like this because you know it's garbage. With a fisheye lens on it. Look at that. The operator of the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which should be charged with crimes against humanity, along with the International Atomic Energy Agency, said Thursday they had given up on a plan to begin retrieving debris that contained the melted nuclear fuel at the number 2 reactor. The number 2 reactor. I got a picture of number 2 for you in a second. Here we go. You can see the heat signature at the top of the page of the number 2 reactor. The number 2 reactor actually went China syndrome deep into the earth, the 2 fuel pools and the reactor cores. Once they lose water, the water starts evaporating because the fuel is so hot. Typically, they got to put 120,000 liters in each of the pool. So the top of the building each day needs about 240,000 liters of water every day added to the fuel pools. And this is special water, by the way, what they call borated water, to stop criticalities from happening, because it stops the chain reaction, right? So once the water dips below one of the fuel rods, the zirconium cladding immediately ignite at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperature as soon as the air is exposed to it. So, and like zirconium is what you used to use in the old flash cameras. If you look back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you see these great big flashes, and they go flash, and then they would pull it out and throw it away. That was zirconium. The same zirconium that they're using for claddings. So as soon as it's exposed for oxygen, it goes pop. And so what those flashes used to do, they have a little hammer, would break the glass, and then the air would rush in, the flash of zirconium, and then they would click their picture, right? And so all of those cameras, everywhere they went, and all the photographers were being incredibly contaminated with the zirconium. So anyway, that ignites at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. It's flash. And if you got a lot of it, it'll just flash through. And then the uranium plutonium pellets, which are inside the fuel, the cladding, will also ignite now, and they'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So this will immediately evaporate all the water at these types of temperatures. We don't have anything to contain it. So that will just drop straight down through the building. It'll go down in the earth. When it hits the water table, it'll detonate the water. The water will actually detonate. It'll expand so quick, because like a liter of water will expand around 1,200 foot in the middle of a second. And so that water will split open the earth like a hydrovolcanic reaction. And that we noticed, because we got the documentation of it, the steam coming out of 6 places out of the ground where it's split open like an earthquake is at 10 sieverts per hour. But those Geiger counters are maxed out at 10 sieverts per hour, these stationary Geiger counters. And so 3 sieverts an hour is a lethal dose. So when you get the whole site has to be abandoned many times. And we actually have the footage of the steam permeating the whole site, which means you get off, you just run. You run. If you see that steam, you run. That's a lethal doses. And so for the fire, where you normally got fire extinguishers, they have sneakers. Retrieving a highly radioactive mixture of melted fuel rods and debris from the crippled. Calling it crippled is completely dishonest. And anybody that calls it crippled, I think, should be crippled for life. Particularly if they're professors and academics. They should have their knees broken. Retrieving a highly radioactive mixture, and whenever it heals, you should break it again. Retrieving a highly radioactive mixture of melted fuel, nuclear fuel, and debris, which is the fuel mixed with cement and steel and rebar and everything else, from the crippled power plant is considered one of the hardest tasks in the process of its decommissioning. You can't decommission it because you're dealing with a meltdown. You can't decommission a meltdown. You can't decommission this. And these buildings should have been razed right to the ground with remote control bulldozers and excavators, and cranes. They left them there so they can put stumps over them and pretend that they were in the reactors. The revised schedule will utilize a new method of retrieval using a telescopic tube first instead of a robotic arm, pending approval for the nuclear regulation authorities, which were created post-Fukushima. It's estimated TEPCO must remove a total of 880 tons of debris from Unit 1 to 3 that suffered meltdowns. They actually used the S, look at that. And so, this is really interesting. So they're talking about Unit 1, 2, and 3. So how come Unit 4 doesn't get any loving? What did Unit 4 do to get so much hate? Why did he snubbing Unit 4? They're claiming that Unit 4 didn't melt down, but look at it. And so this is how big the building should be, and the fuel pools and reactor cores are at the very top of the building. They were changing the fuels, so which meant at least 2/3 of the reactor core was still in the reactor. All they were doing was the typical maintenance. And that's usually around 11,000 things. And so they bring in around 1,000 outside workers to do that kind of work because they don't want their own workers to get the cancer, right? And heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. The process is considered a daunting task, so scumbag TEPCO plans to expand its scale gradually. And the Manichi Shimbu helicopter took that picture on the 2021, February 13. But they're the same one that put out a single picture of the Shika nuclear plant they said was taken on the 2nd of January of this year. And all the media showed the same picture. But that same media didn't show another single picture of the entire Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture peninsula. They only showed the one picture, which meant it wasn't real, right? TEPCO, so why did they fake the picture, see? TEPCO also said Thursday approximately 56,000 tons of treated radioactive water. Treated water. And this is probably one of the worst crimes against humanity we've ever heard tell of. Where now they're claiming August 24th of last year was the first time anything got out of these buildings. These pictures are 2013, by the way. But all the buildings were detonated and destroyed by March the 16th. And so they lost their entire inventories except for, 90% of their inventories for reactor 1, 3, and 4 well, 3 and 4 is 100%. It's pretty obvious. Number 3 went off like a firecracker. It just went pow. So does that look like a 19-story building to anybody, either one of these? 19 stories, 65 meters, 190-foot tall buildings? So they're refusing to acknowledge that the reactor core and the fuel pools are missing. So this industry has to go. This is a despicable, disgusting, sadistic, genocide, omnicide industry. This is attacking everything with replicating cells. It has to go, or you're going, and every other species. You have to deal with this. You can't keep pretending it's not happening. And so now they claim that the only thing is getting out is tritium. The only thing they got out of this is tritium. And that they expect the amount of tritium to be 14 trillion becquerels. Now, the CANDU reactors in Canada, the one in New Brunswick, releases 14,600,000 trillion atoms a year legally, which is outrageous. That's outrageous. That's absolutely extermination event machine. It takes many decades for it to manifest. But you're talking about a hideous... Nuclear reactors are hideous disease factories. For at least 100 miles in every direction, it's a 100% disease factory. And almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. If not, they're in a big city. And so they're claiming, because the numbers, when you don't have pictures, and you notice all these stories, they don't show you a single picture. They don't show you that. And reactor 3 and reactor 4. Remember, there's 4 of these reactors and 8 fuel pools now that are 100% gone. They're not maybe, not perhaps, not could be, maybe Dana's right. No, they're gone. There's nothing left of the buildings. There was no reason not to razz what's the stump that's left to the ground. And they're going to kill you and everybody you love and everything and everybody's future if you don't go after them with every soul in your body. I'm not doing this because it's fun or it's exciting. I'm doing this in desperation that the world come to its senses. I'm running an educational program, and then I'm using 24-hour news cycle to bring attention to the many bizarre facets to this equation. And there's so many. It's such a complicated story. It's very difficult for the average person to work out anything on their own. Unless they come here, then they can start extrapolating things on their own within a few shows. TEPCO plans to release about 31,000 tons of treated water by March. Like, they've never stopped releasing it. The buildings are completely destroyed. So when you see these bizarre connotations that they plan to release water when there's no way to contain it. You can't contain anything there. These are lethal doses. You can't go near it. If you send 1 million people running at that with shovels, every one of them will die before they can get a scoop. The wastewater generated in the process of cooling the melted reactor fuel and mixed with rain and groundwater has gone through a processing system that removes everything except for tritium. That's the official story. That was cooked up by the International Atomic Energy Agency on top of that, which is just a corporation, a subsidy of UN, which is a military-industrial complex with 195 militaries. UN shouldn't exist. You've got to get them out of your country and off your planet. ASAP. You can't filter this stuff because you're gathering up radiation. So how would I put it? Well, think of the every 15 inches there's a gold coin, and you're on this piece of land, a million square miles. And so you're running around, you're picking up all these gold coins, and you're coming back and you're putting it in one place. What happens? You start to get a great big pile, right? Well, this is the same thing where you're taking fuel particulates, you're gathering it up, putting it in a filter. And then what happens now is it has so much energy because you can't separate it because you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas mixed together. You're going to have a criticality in the filter. Or if you put it in the tank, you're going to have a criticality in the bottom of the tank. It's going to burn holes through the tank and everything is just going to drain out. And we're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta. You can't just have that. You can't filter this separately. You can't filter it. It would have been done everywhere else a long time before it happened there. And if it was done successfully there, you would see it done everywhere else. And we know the Riva system didn't work, which is the French system. It's the exact same thing. I covered that last night, a lot of the actual documentation of this type of the filtration system, the ALP system, the Riva system, the series system, the carry-on system. We showed all the tanks to Mari Yamaguchi cover stories from AP, which is the government sees the disposal of 1.3 million tons of water. So normally you can fill up all the tanks 6 times a day from a single reactor. The reactors normally need 4,800 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute. Once they overheat, you need a lot more. And what they're claiming is, they've been gathering up, is the equivalent of 130 tons a day. A garden hose puts out 140 tons a day, just a typical 3/8-inch garden hose. So they're suggesting that the multi-reactors, they're spraying a garden hose split 4 ways. So one of the 4 splits in the 3/8-inch garden hose is sprayed on that building. One of the 3/8 inches that are, right, this is insanity to suggest this is true. Retriever, and at the time of the reactor 2 of the melted fuel at the Fukushima reactor will not start by March. At the number 2 reactor, due to technical difficulties. Well, reactor 2 liquefied. They're claiming now, like they did for reactor 3 and reactor 4, they're going to get the fuel, that they claim they already got the fuel out of the pools. And I showed you the pictures. They're claiming they got the fuels out of the pools, which they didn't, of course, because they don't exist. They claimed in 2014 they got all the fuel out of the pool of reactor 4. And in 2021, on the 10th anniversary, they said they got all the fuel out of the pool of reactor 3, the mix up, which is a plutonium mixed oxide facility. It's very frustrating because we're going to lose our planet and all the species. So I'm very, very concerned. Retrieval of the melted fuel of the Fukushima reactor will not start by itself. You can't retrieve something when it doesn't exist. This is 100% propaganda. Why don't they go down to Chernobyl and practice there first? Started debris test removal from Fukushima plant to be postponed until October of this year. This is not Fukushima. Reactor 2. It's ludicrous to suggest it is. Now the robotic arm made with the British at Sellafield, which is a degenerate bunch of scumbags. If you put anything in close to the fuel, you can't get close to that ever again. That's a lethal dose. And if you take that robotic arm and put it at a subway station buried in the wall, everybody walks past it for 1 million years, die that day. It's that kind of dangerous. The tanks were all built, I showed all that last night, were built in 2013. By April 2013, they had 1,000 tanks built. So first off, they didn't know what was going to happen, so why did they build 1,000 tanks in 2013, but allegedly didn't get them all full till this year? Lying is the name of the game, right? And the industry does it best. They're the best lawyers on the planet. TEPCO, which shouldn't exist, everybody in this should be in jail for life. However, the water that is constantly poured into the reactors, destroyed reactors, to cool down the nuclear fuel fragments flow out through gaps highly contaminated with radioactive particles. That's the closest we've heard to the truth, and it's still far from the truth, but that's the closest we've heard in quite a while. But the official story is it's 130 tons a day. Normally the reactors use 4,500 tons a minute. And 130 tons a day is equal to a garden hose split 4 ways. And the water is treated through the Advanced Liquid Processing System, the ALPS. Let me show you that, just because I can only promise talk about it so many times, but then I have to show it to you. I got a bit of a headache. There's so much work every day. And I don't know if you noticed, but I never lose my enthusiasm for the story. Because I've done research expeditions for years, and I don't have any illusions. Unfortunately, and you can't just switch off the facts, see? April 21st, 2014. That's 3 years, 1 month later. TEPCO is unable to bring contaminated water issues under control at the Fukushima plant. The Advanced Liquid Processing System has yet to function reliably / yet to function. The Areva system was the exact same system in 3.5 years later, 6 months later than the other story, which is 3.5 years later. And TEPCO told to abandon the Areva, which is France's system. And for the last 3 years, the Areva system is unused and kept out of operation. They were going to build a bypass operation to pump the water coming down the mountain directly into the ocean so it didn't flow through the site. That never happened. They were going to build a fence. It was going to cost $1 billion. They were going to build a fence and stop the radiation from getting in the Pacific Ocean. Again, like, there's no lie they won't tell you. They're going to build an ice wall rather than a real wall. And they admit that there's zero possibility that could work. There's no top, there's no bottom. And why would you build a wall? Ice wall. Why wouldn't you build a real wall? Why would you do that? A big refrigeration plant, they need $12 million a year to make that work. And then the series system, the Korean system, they admitted that didn't work. And we never heard tell of it after 2013. That was only going to remove cesium, they said. And that's because that's one of the biggest lies for 80 years is the word cesium. Right? That's part of the cover story. You'll hear it with all nuclear events where they talk about cesium. The reactors don't run on cesium, they run on plutonium and uranium. And the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. That's why we call it a curium, the meltdown itself. But they admitted in 2013 that the plant has already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks from the reactor buildings. As I showed you, you got more to worry about than leaks. Like saying there's leaks in the buildings this is original footage. Saying that's a leak is completely dishonest and disingenuous and a blatant lie, right? I mean, that's the original Reactor 3. Every nuclear academic that looked at Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 knew the fuel pools were gone, knew the reactor cores were gone, and 12 years later, almost 13 years later, still refused to tell you. And that should terrify you. That should absolutely horrify you. And so when they claim they're going to release 54,000 tons in 2024, and that they only started releasing water of August the 24th of last year, well, the average person doesn't know what you know if you watched all of this show so far. Oh, excuse me. Meanwhile, TEPCO pushed back the operation and removed the nuclear debris from the plant's Unit 2 until October this year. They're not removing debris. They're trying to get a little nip of it out, which doesn't make any sense. It's meant to direct you away from the reality, right? Sending in a drone the size of a slice of toast is humiliating that they would say something like that. It's contempt for you when they say stuff like that. The JAXA slim lunar probe, Japan's nuclear pole, pulled off a pinpoint landing within 100 feet of the spot. 100 meters of the target area, rather. One of its main engines lost thrust at an altitude of about 50 meters due to some kind of abnormality. Well, it was made by Japan. What do you expect? And here he is with sheep eyes again. And they actually, it had two little rovers on it. And the rovers, you can see, look at all the solar panels they got on it. So when they say they couldn't get any light because it didn't land the way they wanted it to, I don't think they're being very honest. I don't imagine this is the real footage, because how would they take it? But anyway, once it landed, they did take some footage because they have drones on the ground. So that's the pictures there, where it released the two small drones. And this was one of the pictures it took. And if you believe anything that the Japanese tell you, you're a certified sucker. Quake-hit beauty salon reopens using well water. Most homes and businesses in Noto City, Ishikawa Prefecture, lost their water supply for 25 days, not expected to be fully restored till April of this year. So the hair salon guy goes out and gets water from a well. And she's in her 80s, bless her heart. She said, having my hair washed made me feel refreshed and rejuvenated. Yes, after 25 days, after being abandoned by the government for 25 days. Thank God somebody's trying to do something for these poor people. More heavy snowfall forecast for the regions along the Sea of Japan coast. And like, we're talking heavy snowfall. We're about 150, 160 centimeters or something. It's crazy how much snow we're talking about. And so these buildings that have been rattled every 7 minutes for 25 days, but earthquakes, are already collapsed and everything else. Imagine putting all this heavy snow on it, right? Devastating. My heart goes out to them because they could have run and rescued them. If they had sent in 10 or 12,000 soldiers, they could have had everybody rescued and moved out of the danger zone in the first 5 days before the snow and the rain showed up. They had 5 perfect days, and they wouldn't let anybody go in there. How come? Fukushima, Ishikawa Prefecture, where they had the major fire too. And they show you this stuff here, but there's no context. It doesn't mean nothing, right? Why are they doing that? And most of this is going to be the burnt area, right? They give you no context. You have no way. Oh, look at that. That's our second piece of heavy equipment we've seen. That's amazing. In 25 days, they actually showed 2 pieces of heavy equipment. That's not like heavy, but still something. At least we know they're not total scumbags. Well, actually, they're scumbags. Israeli forces are ramping up air and ground attacks on the city in Gaza. Would Israel go to war against a country that had 4,000 tanks also, that had jet fighters and a navy and drones? How do you think they're going to fare against somebody that had equal weapons? I don't think they'll last very long. They're only used to beating up people that have no weapons to fight back with. Food maker develops plant-based tuna to preserve ocean resources. That's quite the story, isn't it? plant-based tuna. I think what they're doing is they're admitting that they killed the oceans, and so they're expecting $68 million by the end of 2030, but then they're expecting $44 billion after 2030 or something. I mean, it looks great, but if you didn't kill the ocean, you wouldn't have to do stuff like that, would we? With radioactive fallout. Ukraine to start building 4 nuclear reactors this year. They're conscripting 16-year-olds now. Last month, it was anybody over 40 they were sending into the front line. If you didn't go, they shoot them. Now they're going to conscript. And like, I'd done a video when this originally started and said that Ukraine should surrender. That was before I realized it was actually a proxy war with NATO. NATO, instead of fighting the war themselves, was just giving the weapons from 29 countries, 29 militaries, to the Ukrainians. And so that's what you call a proxy war, right? A really dirty thing to do. And NATO was created in response to the former Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union was dissolved, NATO didn't have a boogeyman anymore. They should have been dissolved too. Instead, they've been around dishing out evil ever since. So, like, is that crazy or is that crazy? Ukraine's going to start building 4 nuclear reactors in 2024. Like, first off, they don't have enough money to repair a single city they got, or equipment, or how are they going to build 4 reactors? And who the hell is going to build them? Russia's not going to build them. Ukraine can't build their own reactors. France can't build it. France just asked for another $13 billion to finish Sizewell. The U.S. is losing the nuclear energy race to Russia and China. Like, what are you talking about? They're winning the renewable waste race. In 2023, there was 507 gigawatts of renewables. That's almost twice the gigawatts of all nuclear combined in just 12 months. In fact, nuclear lost 2 gigawatts last year, rather 1.7 gigawatts. The notorious 3 Mile Island accident in 1979 killed, injured, irradiated, or harmed 0 people. Really? Really? Well, actually, that's not true, is it? October 11, 1989, testing of evaporators began at 3 Mile Island. Think about this story here. 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant workers, which was Ernie Gunnison and Lake Barrett, prepared Wednesday to begin testing equipment used to boil off 2.3 million gallons of water, contaminated the nation's worst commercial nuclear accident. Well, Santa Susana released more radiation, 460 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island. It was a sodium reactor, just still melting down, same as the Fermi plant, right? Small amounts of one radioactive element, tritium. So they're claiming they're claiming back in 1989 that the only thing being released is tritium. Isn't that interesting? And we see that with almost every nuclear accident throughout history where they say the only thing that will be getting released is tritium. Tritium is created by the atmosphere, and they'll tell all this grandiose lies. And the release effects on the average person within 50 miles, which is 2 million people, will be less than the amount of radiation received from a year watching color television. So if you're like, to suggest that ingesting anthropogenic man-made radiation is like watching color television, and that's not a crime, means we don't really have any hope of a future. Because making those types of statements should be a crime. Because it's unbelievably evil to suggest that it's like watching color television. It's like watching color television for an extra year for 2 million people. Plant officials believe it tainted, like, what they done is so evil, it's so unconscionable. It's $4 million effort to get rid of the water. Like, if you took 5 liters of that water and put it at a subway, everybody walks past it for a million years would die. You can't filter that water. And way back then, they're calling it tritium. All I can say is, like, these people need the shit kicked out of them every time they walk down the road, as far as I can tell. 2 million people around 3 Mile Island during the meltdown received only 1 millirim above the usual dose of radioactivity. And they said a normal radioactive background dose is 100 millirims per year. Like, this is absurdness. Like, you're not getting gamma shines, X-rays, neutrons, bombardments, beta rays. You're getting physical atoms. You're breathing it in. And to suggest that it was completely innocuous and benign and harmless, there's no reason that they shouldn't get the... Like, if they're dead, they should be dug up and get the shit kicked out of them. 2 million people around 3 Mile Island got a millirim. So they were breathing in radiation. So there's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, besides cancer. There's respiratory, pituitary, thyroid. And you screw up the thyroid producing all these radioactive hormones. Guess what happens then? Literally everything you can dream of. And as you get older, there's Alzheimer's, dementia. And that's for children. Then there's autism, Down syndrome. There's diabetes. The nuclear industry not with a bunch of parasites. They really aren't. They're nothing but parasites, rather. We will endure the difficulties. The partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island. A plane carrying a detection equipment measured radiation levels between 300 and 1200 millirims per hour. These are absurd numbers. And a plane is not a very accurate way of measuring these plumes. So these are catastrophic plumes. And Dick Thornburg wouldn't let anybody evacuate. And he was the new governor for about 70 days or something. These are, like, this is just unbelievable that people could be this evil. The radiation leaked from the plant had been in the low 5s to 7 milligrams per hour, according to the company monitoring teams, and that the incident is nothing out of the ordinary realm. It's completely out of the ordinary. A non-controlled burst of radioactive gas is vented from the containment building into the auxiliary building, and a plane carrying detection equipment measured the radiation level between 300 and 1200 millirims. Catastrophic numbers. Dick Thornburg, press secretary, indicated there's no need to evacuate, but says the governor has warned people within 10-mile radius of the plant to stay indoors and close their windows, which is the opposite of what you should do. And the reason you have sirens at all nuclear power plants in North America, for instance, is because of 3 Mile Island. Staying indoors and closing your windows is guaranteed to get a brutal dose. Trying to escape, guaranteed to get a brutal dose. But staying there is the worst scenario. Degenerate Thornburg issued his advisory for pregnant women and preschool-aged children 3 days later to evacuate from a 5-mile radius of the plant, and then ordered 23 schools in the area to close 3 days later. It said an indoor restriction would be lifted at midnight at 3 Mile Island for residents within a 10-mile radius. Like, I'm just furious every time I read these stories about this. And I've done entire presentations on my site here of 3 Mile Island, and the information is horrifying. The responsibility for the emergency operations at the plant shifted to the NRC. The responsibility for the emergency operations at the plant shifted to the NRC. So why is TEPCO at Fukushima instead of the regulatory agencies? Why is TEPCO? Right? Do you get it? What do they got on their feet if there's nothing to worry about? How Dick Thornburg masterfully handled the 3 Mile Island disaster. He's the guy with the black glasses, the piece of shit with the black glasses. At the time, he averted the tragedy that millions feared and expected, a nuclear Armageddon. Well, because you can't see it, or smell it, or hear it, or feel it, or taste it, or touch it. A mere 11 miles of the state capital in Harrisburg had been the site of a nuclear accident. Even the governor for a scant 71 days when he received a phone call saying there was a nuclear accident. Other than cursory briefing, he knew nothing about nuclear energy. And the state of emergency was last from March the 28th till May the 9th. March, April, May. He handled a tense situation when few folks actually realized the effects of the meltdown or its causes. And from the onset, the governor faced a decision whether to evacuate some 200,000 people in the immediate vicinity of 3 Mile Island. And ultimately, he correctly refused to issue a general evacuation order despite intense political pressure on him to do so. He correctly refused it. No, he should have evacuated. On the third day of the crisis, he did recommend pregnant women and preschool children within 5 miles of 3 Mile Island. What do you mean preschool only and pregnant women only? His family should be sued by the victims. The reasons for Thornburg's stellar performance were many, but perhaps 4 were the most crucial. He refused to issue a general evacuation order which could have created a panic, which is what we heard of after every nuclear meltdown. The same thing. It would be a panic selling of nuclear stocks, right? It would be a panic because the nuclear industry now would be under siege and the truth would come out about how evil these fucking scumbags actually are. I don't understand this picture. Let me just be very clear about this. If you have a nuclear meltdown, don't be those guys, okay? Don't do that. You got to fix this shit. You can't go running towards a nuclear meltdown. You're supposed to run away. Going there, bad. Running away, good. It's so hard to believe that people ran to a nuclear meltdown. 3 Mile Island and the exaggerated risks of nuclear power. That story came out January 14, 2020. Caused no physical harm, but the event changed the public perceptions of the risk of nuclear energy. And what do you see in the background? Nothing but farmland. Man. They're so evil they don't even know they're evil. Visualize all the nuclear waste in the world. This is fun. Let me give you an idea what kind of scumbags these people actually are. That Hanford dumped high-level waste, 450 billion gallons, directly into the soil in just one go in a short period of time. Directly into the soil at Hanford's site, which is right alongside the Columbia River. And so to appreciate what 450 billion gallons actually is equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And we're talking high-level waste from the chain reaction, folks. And they're trying to say you can put it all in these nice little neat packages. I just hate everything about this industry and everybody in it. I hate them all equally. France seeks more UK government funding for seeks more UK government funding. UK government won't fund anything. And why is there nuclear plants surrounded by farms as far as the eyes can see? How come? The biggest construction site in human history on top of that, and they're calling it carbon free. This is a crazy story because nuclear is on the skids. Nuclear lost 2 reactors in 2023. 1.7 gigawatts. Renewables was 507 gigawatts of new renewables in just 12 months. And so in order for them to break global record in 2025, they're going to need like 60 reactors to come on next year. I guarantee you that's not going to happen. Jeez. This disgusting, despicable creature right here is a professor, an associate professor of nuclear engineering at North Carolina State University, who posed as nuclear science lover. This is we've covered him quite a few times over the years. This is a despicable, subhuman creature. I got to adjust the volume. I got the headphones on because I didn't do it earlier.
And, they still haven't figured out what to do with the waste.
So that's John F. Kennedy. John R. Kennedy, is it? I can't remember. John Robert, I can't remember. So he was talking about they don't know what to do with nuclear waste. Nuclear waste is still splitting atoms. So when you take a reactor core, it powers 1 million homes, say, right? It does that by splitting atoms. But it's in a containment vessel, you say, so everything is okay. But they got to put it in a fuel pool after 18 months. And so now it's not in a containment, but it's still splitting atoms. And those atoms are released into the environment all day through evaporation of about 120,000 liters. And each liter is saturated with anthropogenic man-made isotopes that never go away. Okay, so Robert Hayes, is that his name?
Know what to do with the waste.
Now, if you're going to define safe as having zero risk...
Hang on, I'll turn it up. If you're going to define safe as having zero risk, well, there's nobody out there thinks there's zero risk for anything. Nobody's that stupid. But this is the scam, right?
Then literally nothing is safe.
This is an actual weasel that can stand upright.
Everything has some kind of risk. Walking down the street, you could get hit by a car.
When a nuclear power plant melts down, you can't breathe the air on your continent. It's quite the discrepancy between walking down the street and getting hit by a car. Because you can watch out for cars, right? And you can avoid it. You can't avoid the radiation because you can't smell it or see it or hear it or feel it.
Walking up the stairs, you could fall down the stairs.
So, you can't equate stuff like this with a nuclear accident. Japan has 14,200 surgeries a year on children because of congenital malformations out of 100,000. These are extraordinary. 6 out of 10 children have diabetes. They didn't want diabetes. They got diabetes because of nuclear. The only way to describe it is a piece of shit.
Eating your breakfast, you could get poisoned.
Yeah, if you're eating from Fukushima Prefecture, you can get poisoned. It's such a weasel. It's such a despicable thing to do what he's doing there. It's such a dishonest and disingenuous and deceitful. And as for eating your breakfast and getting poisoned, yeah. Fukushima has grown. The food was banned by 55 countries for a decade because you will get poisoned. They're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Robert Hayes, professor of shit, Robert Hayes, should have to go down there and mark on the 30 million 1-ton bags that Dana is wrong. I'm so sick of this person that if I was in the country, I would go to the university and start protesting. And that his students should get refunds and they should never be allowed to work in the nuclear industry. Anybody that is taught by him in a university should be disqualified from working in the nuclear industry ever. And that university, that everybody gets cancer, should consider suing this university. At North Carolina State University, everybody in the planet that gets cancer should consider suing North Carolina State University because of the students that this fucker is putting out are murderers, just like him. The lowest form of life imaginable this person actually is. Oh, yeah. Breakfast insurance. How we doing here? Let me see. I so despise Robert Hayes because he's a monster. That's what he does is unconscionable. Right? That's unconscionable to say the things that he's saying. It's really unconscionable that somebody could be this evil. Yeah, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thank you, James. Good one. Blue Oyster. I guess that's it, folks, for tonight. It's pointless for me to sit here and tell you how dishonest and corrupt and degenerate and diabolical and fiendish and monstrous Robert Hayes is. How ungodly, how foul and vile and wicked and evil and atrocious and monstrous and horrendous and grisly and demonic and sadistic and twisted and freakish Robert Hayes actually is, and that university is. It's just unconscionable. Yeah, he should definitely. Let's cover the poll here. I'll bring it up in a second. Let me get off this screen. Where are we to here? Was it evil for Japan and the International Atomic Energy Agency to hide 8 nuclear fuel pool meltdowns at Fukushima's 4 nuclear reactors? I appreciate everybody voting. Thank you. And you all got it right. It's evil is just like these polls are meant to really highlight something serious wrong with this nuclear industry. And if you go back through all of my videos and you just screen capture the polls and you make a print like a little booklet and you start passing it out to all the say all the doctor's offices and stuff like that. It changed the world because the polls are pretty innocent looking, but once you start reading through all the polls, you see what's going on. You start looking at nuclear different, right? Good night, everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. And hopefully there's nothing else goes wrong between now and Sunday. And good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I'll read the comments after. I can't seem to scroll. And I forgot to update my browser today, see if that would fix it. So I don't know, even if I'm streaming right now. Because everything's froze up over here. It does say excellent connection, though. I see that. I'm burnt out. That was a long... Like last week, we ended up doing a show on Friday, right? Just to try to catch up. And then we got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday into this week. And they were all difficult shows. So that was really cool. We got through that. And it's caught up on me, I must admit, today. But I worked really hard all day. We got out a good show tonight. So I'm happy. And if there's any breaking news, I'm going to be back, right, with another video. But if not, I'll be back on Sunday night. And that's all I got for everybody tonight. Just feels like my whole body's exhausted today. That's okay. I'll be refreshed by Sunday. We'll be back kicking nuclear scumbag in the teeth again. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. I'll see everybody Oh, I didn't mean that. We'll see everybody on. What's the date today? The 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. At the same time as tonight, as we started. Come on, Dana. I'm just exhausted. I feel like I need a vacation. I'll be okay in a couple of days. We'll get it together. Have a great night and a great weekend, folks. Hugs for everybody. Take care, everyone.